When Emily's premature son is born under life-threatening conditions, she finds herself clinging to hope in the sterile, anxiety-filled halls of the NICU. But instead of support, she's blindsided by her own mother's insensitivity. After discovering that her mother, Linda, took smiling selfies next to her son's incubator, without asking, and posting them online, Emily is torn between grief and rage. As Emily confronts the woman who raised her, old wounds resurface, a childhood filled with emotional neglect, performative parenting, and a mother obsessed with appearances. Banning Linda from the hospital sparks a chain of confessions and family reckonings, testing the strength of Emily's new role as a mother. Each chapter reveals deeper layers of betrayal, blurred boundaries, and the painful cost of protecting your child from your own family. What begins as an act of maternal defense quickly spirals into a public spectacle, threatening Emily's fragile healing and forcing her to choose: preserve the image of a family, or protect her son at any cost. I hadn't slept in 32 hours. The monitors in the NICU clicked and beeped like a distant storm, mechanical and cold. My son, Elias, was barely the size of a loaf of bread, encased in tubes and wires that looked more like punishment than protection. Every breath he took felt like a miracle. Every pause between beeps made my heart stumble. I sat next to his incubator, fingers trembling above the plastic, whispering a lullaby he'd never heard before, and that's when I saw the flash, not from a machine. From a camera. My mother's camera. She was standing on the other side of the incubator, posing, smiling, holding her phone up, angled perfectly, chin tilted, like she was at brunch with friends. Her other hand rested delicately against the glass. Behind her, my son's fragile body blurred into the background. Click, another selfie. I didn't say anything at first. I froze. Maybe I thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion. Maybe I didn't want to believe what I saw. But then she giggled. A small, satisfied sound, like she'd just captured the perfect moment. My world, already frayed and unraveling, snapped. Are you serious? I asked, my voice sharp, slicing through the artificial calm of the room. She looked at me, surprised. What are you doing? I thought he looked peaceful. I wanted to remember this. He's not a memory. He's fighting for his life. My mother frowned, offended, not remorseful. Emily, don't be dramatic. You know I'm just trying to show support. By taking selfies? She put her phone down slowly, as if I was the one making a scene. You're exhausted. I get it. But don't take it out on me. That was always her refrain. I'm just trying to help. Don't take it out on me. When I was 9 and crying because she forgot to pick me up from school. Don't take it out on me when she brought her latest boyfriend to my high school graduation instead of coming alone like I asked. Don't take it out on me, but this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Elias. I need you to leave, I said, calmer than I felt. Excuse me? Now. Leave the hospital. Don't come back. Her mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. The silence between us felt louder than the machines. She looked around, as if someone might come to her defense, a nurse, another family member, anyone to confirm she wasn't the villain here. But no one did. No one could. It was just the two of us, and the tiny baby breathing in shallow gasps between us. Without another word, she turned and walked out. Her heels clicked against the sterile floor, fading with each step. I sat back down, my body shaking, heart hammering. I wasn't sure if I'd overreacted. I wasn't sure if I'd regret it. But as I looked at Elias, so small, so new, I knew I couldn't let the chaos of my mother touch him. Not now. Not ever again. I pulled out my phone, just to distract myself. That's when I saw it, a notification from Facebook. Linda uploaded 3 new photos. And there it was. Her face, lit perfectly. Her caption, prayers for my brave little grandson. Grandma is here, holding down the fort. Hashtag NICU strong, hashtag family first. The comments were full of sympathy and praise. You're such a strong woman, Linda. Elias is lucky to have you. She's handling this so well. And not a single word about me. Not one mention that I was even there. I closed the app. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. From fury. What kind of person does this? I didn't know it then, but that post would set everything in motion. That moment, her needing to be seen more than she needed to be present, would unravel everything we thought we'd hidden as mother and daughter, because this wasn't the first time she made my pain about her. But it would be the last time. I let her. The next morning, the nurses kept their voices soft around me. I could tell they knew. Word travels fast in places like the NICU, not just between staff, but between mothers too. The ones who live in the hallways, camped out with tired eyes and pumping schedules and a hope so fragile it's barely spoken aloud. One nurse, Jessica, lingered longer than usual during vitals. She didn't mention my mother. Didn't need to. But I could see it in the way she looked at me, like she wanted to say, "Good for you." Still, the post was out there. A T had already been shared dozens of times. People from my mother's church were commenting, distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Strangers sending prayers. Not for me, for Linda. Always for Linda. That was her gift, really. She knew how to perform grief when I was 14. And broke my collarbone during a soccer game. She showed up at the hospital in full makeup, telling nurses about her poor baby with tears that never quite touched her eyeliner. When I had a miscarriage at 25, she organized a prayer circle, not for me, but for the image of herself as a grieving mother of the grieving. Everything was a mirror, and she always stood in front of it. By noon, the hospital social worker had reached out. Not to reprimand me, but to check in. "There's been some noise online," she said carefully. "We just want to ensure you feel safe and supported in your decisions." I assured her I did, but inside, I was unraveling. My husband, James, was still out of town, stuck on a work assignment he couldn't escape, flying back as soon as he could. He kept texting every few hours, "How is Elias? How are you?" I didn't have the words. Not yet. I needed him there, needed someone to anchor me before I floated off the edge, and then, in the early afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a direct message. From a woman I didn't recognize. "Hi Emily. I know we don't know each other, but I'm in your mom's women's group. I just wanted to say I'm praying for your son, and I'm sorry you're going through this alone." Alone. I stared at the message. My throat tightened. She thought I was alone. Because that's what my mother had shown the world, that she was holding this family together while I, vanished. I clicked on my mother's Facebook again. She had gone live. Yes. Live. It was a 2-minute video outside the hospital. She wore a soft pink scarf, her eyes red but face composed. She thanked everyone for their prayers, asked for continued strength, and ended with, "All we can do is be strong for Emily. She's struggling." I shut the phone off. Not muted. Not silenced. Off. My son was inside a plastic box, lungs underdeveloped, body fighting every second to stay. And outside, his grandmother was crafting a story in which she was the savior. Not him. Not me. Her. That night, James finally arrived. He came straight from the airport, wearing the same clothes he left in, eyes heavy with worry. The moment he saw Elias, he broke. He cried like I hadn't seen him cry since we lost our first baby. And when I told him about my mother, the selfies, the posts, the video, he didn't hesitate. "She's done," he said. "She doesn't come back. Not now. Not later." But of course, it wasn't that easy, because when I texted her, just one sentence, "You're no longer welcome in the hospital or near Elias," she didn't respond to me. She posted again. A screenshot of the text. Blurred. But just enough to stir the pot. The caption, "Some wounds run deep. Prayers appreciated during this painful time." And again, the sympathy poured in. People demanding to know how a daughter could be so cruel. Others speculating about postpartum depression. Some saying I needed deliverance. This time, I didn't cry. I stared at the screen, numb. She was painting me as unstable, as ungrateful, as mentally unfit, and in a place where my world was already crumbling, she was laying the groundwork to erase me. One post at a time. I always believed that motherhood would soften something in me, that it would settle the tremors left behind by my own childhood. That once I had a child of my own, I'd finally feel what I never felt growing up: safety, belonging. Some invisible thread of unconditional love that didn't depend on applause or public perception. But as I sat in the hospital cafeteria that night, alone with a cold sandwich and a mind racing through memories I'd buried, I realized something far more terrifying. Becoming a mother hadn't softened me. It had sharpened every edge I dulled to survive my own. I kept thinking about the day my mother taught me how to fake cry. I was 7. I'd gotten in trouble for something at school, I don't even remember what, and she sat me down in front of the mirror and said, "You need to learn how to win people over. Look sad, but not messy. Like in movies." She practiced expressions with me, not apologies. Not accountability, expressions. Because image was everything. And if you couldn't be good, you had to look good being sorry. I never realized how deep that lesson went until now. Until she was using my son's struggle, his barely there breaths, to pose for pity and collect compliments. James tried to stay strong for me, but I saw how it aided him too. He offered to call her, confront her, try to reason with her. I told him not to bother. You can't reason with someone who believes their version of events is more real than yours simply because more people believe them. The comments on her post had doubled by the next day. Some sympathetic, some vicious. One woman wrote, "Your daughter should be ashamed. I'd give anything for a mother like you." Another, "This new generation is just cruel. They push away the people who love them." But it was one message, sent privately to me by someone anonymous, that stopped me cold. It said, "You're not the first. Just the first to fight back." I clicked the profile. No photo. No real name. But I knew, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. My mother had done this before. To others, to me, the stories came slowly after that. A cousin from another state sent me a voice note, her own account of being publicly humiliated by my mother at her baby shower, then being cut off when she refused to pretend everything was fine. "She wants loyalty," my cousin said. "Not love. There's a difference." I spent that night in the NICU chair, watching Elias sleep. His chest rose and fell with the rhythm of machines, not lungs. He didn't know the war happening outside his incubator. He didn't know that love could be poisoned, manipulated, turned into performance, and I swore he never would. The next morning, I met with the hospital's legal counsel. I requested a formal no-contact order. Not just a ban from the NICU. A full restriction from the hospital grounds. It wasn't easy. It felt dramatic. But so was publicly twisting my pain into her narrative. The lawyer listened carefully. She nodded. As I recounted everything, the selfies, the live stream, the blurred screenshot of my text, "I understand," she said finally. "We'll make it official. And you're doing the right thing. Even if it doesn't feel like it." But it didn't feel right. Not yet, because later that evening, I got a phone call, blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. Just her voice. Calm. Almost rehearsed, "Emily. I don't know what lies you're telling people, but this has gone far enough. If you think you can cut me out of my grandson's life, you're wrong. I will see him. Whether you like it or not." There was no apology. No remorse. Just threat wrapped in velvet, and for the first time, I wasn't scared of her, was scared of how far she might go to stay relevant, and that meant the worst was still coming, before Elias was born. There was supposed to be a baby shower. It was going to be small, just a few close friends, some coworkers, and James's sister who was flying in from out of state. I had everything planned, soft colors, a simple brunch, no games, no spotlight. Just a moment to breathe and feel joy before everything changed, but Linda had other ideas. She called me 2 weeks before the date and said, "Don't worry, I've taken care of the whole thing. My church group is hosting it at the fellowship hall. We're going full theme, Little Prince, golden crowns, the works." I told her no. I told her I didn't want a big production. I didn't want people I didn't know blessing my stomach and giving speeches. I wanted something intimate, not staged. She cried. She accused me of shutting her out, of being ungrateful for all her effort. She said, "This is my grandchild too, Emily. Why do you always make everything about you?" So I canceled the whole thing. I told everyone we were skipping it. That I was too tired, too overwhelmed. Which was true, just not the full truth. What I didn't say was that I couldn't stand the idea of smiling through another performance. What I didn't say was that I didn't trust her to make anything about this baby that wasn't also about her. That memory came back to me the night I got the second voicemail. This time, the voice wasn't calm. It was frantic. Angry. "You think you're protecting him, but you're punishing me. Do you know how that makes me look? People are asking questions. They're wondering if I did something wrong. Do you know how humiliating that is?" Yes. I thought. I do. I've felt that exact kind of humiliation my whole life, but I didn't say it. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned to James, who had been quietly following every update, his support unwavering but his frustration growing. He sat on the edge of the hospital cot next to me, his elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I think we need to go public," he said. I looked at him, stunned. "What do you mean?" "I mean your mom is controlling the story. And people believe her. You're being painted as unstable, selfish, cold. And you're none of those things. You're surviving. You're protecting our son." I hesitated. I didn't want to feed the fire, but part of me knew he was right, because while I was focused on Elias's survival, my mother was building a narrative, one where she was the victim of a cruel, broken daughter. One where her grandson was taken from her, not because of her choices, but because of my cruelty. So I wrote a post, not dramatic. Not vengeful, just honest. I shared a photo of Elias's tiny hand gripping my finger through the incubator wall. And beneath it, I wrote, "Some things are too sacred to stage. Too real to perform. I've spent my life being told to smile through pain, to protect people who never protected me. But I won't do that anymore. Not as a daughter. Not as a mother. My son is not a prop. And protecting him starts now." The post didn't go viral, but it spread, and with it came messages I never expected, from women, from daughters, from strangers who had lived this same quiet war. Some told me they'd been there. Others said they were still there. And more than one said, "I thought I was the only one." But not everyone was supportive. One of my mother's friends commented, "This isn't the place for family drama. Airing dirty laundry helps no one." Another wrote, "I've known Linda for years. She'd never do what you're accusing her of." I didn't respond because the truth doesn't need to be louder than the lie. It just needs to survive it. That night, Elias had a minor setback. His oxygen levels dropped suddenly, and the nurses swarmed. I stood frozen, watching them work, heart thudding like a warning bell. He pulled through barely, and as I held his impossibly tiny hand again, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about what kind of mother I was going to be, what I would tolerate, what I would fight for, and what I would never, ever allow in his world again. Hadn't thought about the baby book in years. It was one of those things you forget you own until something jogs a memory, the way grief sometimes does. One moment you're staring at a hospital monitor, praying your baby's lungs will keep working, and the next you're 12 years old, watching your mother flip through a pastel scrapbook with a stranger, telling a version of your life that Doesn't belong to you. That's what she did whenever someone visited, new boyfriends, distant relatives, even church volunteers, she'd pull out the book. She'd turn the pages with practiced flair, stopping at milestones she liked best. My first steps. My first tooth. My first haircut, which she always told people I insisted on doing myself, a lie she turned into a funny story about independence. What she never showed was the blank space between photos. The gaps where birthdays went undocumented. The pages marked first words and first friends that stayed empty, even when I asked her to fill them in. She said she'd get to it eventually, she never did, but the memory returned with painful clarity the morning I found out she had sent a letter to my pastor. It was James who found out first. Our church had organized a small prayer circle for Elias. Something quiet and private, with just a few people we trusted. After the service, Pastor Renee pulled James aside and asked if I was okay. Not physically. Emotionally, she seems concerned, Renee said gently. She mentioned you might be struggling. That you pushed her away because of postpartum issues. I felt like I'd been slapped. She's building a case, I whispered later, pacing the hospital corridor, trying to breathe through the sudden pounding in my chest. She's framing me. Not online. In real life. James looked grim. She's done it before. And he was right. When I was 16, I went through a depressive episode so severe I stopped speaking for days. My mother called the school, told them I was going through a phase, and made me go to church every evening to pray the sadness out. She didn't call a therapist. She didn't ask what was wrong. She told everyone I was hormonal. Sensitive. Dramatic. I wasn't. I was hurting, and she didn't see it, or worse, didn't want to. I sat in the NICU that night, one hand on the incubator, the other scrolling through an old drive I hadn't opened in years. I found a scan of the baby book. Page after page of smiling faces, cropped carefully, filtered memories. On one page, there was a Polaroid of me at age 5, holding a doll. I remembered that doll. It had a cracked eye, and my mother took it away from me 2 days after the photo. Said it was too dirty to keep, but she kept the photo. She always kept the image. Even when she discarded the real thing, that's what terrified me now. She wasn't just telling people I was unstable. She was crafting a version of me that she could control, a daughter who'd lost touch with reality, who needed prayer more than boundaries. A mother who didn't know what was best for her child, and if she kept planting that seed long enough, someone might believe her, someone with power, like CPS. It sounds paranoid, I know, but when a woman has spent her whole life turning people against you with a smile and a carefully chosen quote, it doesn't feel far-fetched. It feels inevitable. So I took a step I never thought I would. I called a lawyer, not for custody. Not for anything dramatic, just to ask, how do I protect myself from my own mother? She listened. She didn't laugh. She'd heard it before. We call it grandparent interference, she said. It's rare, but not unheard of. You're doing the right thing, documenting everything. Especially if she's trying to undermine you to community leaders. I hung up, my hands cold. The next day, Linda posted a childhood photo of me on her Facebook. I was 5 again, holding that same doll. Her caption read, "Before everything changed. Before walls were built. I miss her. I really do." The comments poured in, "She'll come back to you. She's just scared. Be patient. You're a wonderful mother, Linda. Don't let her push you away." I stared at the photo. That little girl wasn't lost, she'd just stopped playing along, and for the first time, I was starting to understand why. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. James had just gone home for a shower and a change of clothes. I was alone with Elias, who was finally beginning to breathe a little stronger on his own, tiny, rhythmic puffs that the nurse called a good sign. It was the first bit of relief I'd felt in days. I was beginning to believe we might get through this. That he might come home. That we'd survive, and then she appeared. I noticed the change in energy before I saw her. The hallway outside the NICU went quiet. Nurses exchanged glances. One of them moved toward me quickly, almost protectively, her body language tense. "She's here," she whispered. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the glass window and saw her, Linda. My mother. Wearing a navy blue blouse, pearls, and a scarf I recognized from one of her prayer videos. She looked like she was arriving for a charity luncheon, not trying to bypass a legal restriction. "She can't be in here," I said, standing up. No. Security's on the way." But she didn't wait for security. She stepped into the NICU doorway, just far enough to be seen, not far enough to break the law. Her eyes scanned the room until they found me, and then they locked on Elias. Her expression was soft, almost mournful, the way someone might look at a gravestone. I stepped between her and the incubator, my body instinctive, protective. "You need to leave," I said. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded and took a photo with her phone before turning away. That was it. She left before security arrived. No scene. No drama, but the damage had been done, because 3 hours later, that photo was online. She'd captioned it, "Just a glimpse. Just a heartbeat. That's all I needed to know. He's still mine too." And that was when I knew, this wasn't about seeing Elias, this was about proving she could still insert herself into our lives, into our narrative, into our most private spaces. Even when banned, she didn't want access, she wanted dominance. The post went viral within her circle. Dozens of comments. A flood of sympathy. A few called her brave. Others called me cold and possessive and mentally unstable. But one comment stood out. It read, "If my daughter ever treated me like this, I'd go to court and get visitation rights." I stared at the comment for a long time. Not because it shocked me, but because I knew, without a doubt, that it had crossed her mind too. That night, I barely slept. Not because Elias was unstable, he was actually doing better, but because I couldn't stop replaying that moment in the doorway. Her eyes. That photo, she looked at him like a possession, not a person, not a baby who'd nearly died, not a grandson born into wires and ventilators. A symbol. A tool. A key to unlocking attention and adoration, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The next day, I filed an emergency notice with the hospital. Cameras were now restricted in the NICU. Her face was flagged with security. If she returned, they'd call the police. James supported me fully. But I could see the toll it was taking. We were supposed to be focused on Elias's recovery. On learning to feed him. Hold him. One day bring him home. Instead, we were building walls to keep my mother out, and still, she found cracks to crawl through. Later that week, she sent a gift to the hospital. A teddy bear, dressed in hospital scrubs, with a tag that said, "To Elias, from Grandma Linda, who loves you more than you'll ever know." The nurses asked if I wanted it delivered to my room. I told them to throw it away. They looked at me like I was heartless. I could feel the judgment in their silence, but they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know how something as soft as a teddy bear could carry the weight of manipulation. They didn't know that to someone like my mother, even a gift was a statement, even silence was a threat, even love could be weaponized, and I was done pretending that wasn't true. The package arrived at home 2 days before Elias was scheduled for discharge. It was James who found it, a manila envelope, no return address, placed carefully on our doorstep. Not mailed. Hand-delivered. That alone made my skin crawl. We lived in a gated complex. You couldn't just walk in. She must have followed someone through. Maybe pretended she was visiting a neighbor. Maybe smiled, said she was a grandmother dropping something off. Inside the envelope was a stack of photos. Me. Elias. My old baby pictures. Clippings from her scrapbook. And a handwritten letter, folded neatly in thirds, cream-colored paper with The faint scent of lavender perfume. I sat down on the living room floor, hands trembling, and read it in silence. It wasn't an apology, it was a performance. She opened with, "I know you won't let me see you, so this is the only way I can say goodbye. If that's what you really want." Then came the guilt. "I raised you the best I could. You don't know what it was like for me, being alone, struggling to give you everything. I didn't have a guide. I didn't have a partner. I had a daughter who pulled away from me the second she could speak. That was a lie. I clung to her, begged for attention she never gave unless someone was watching. You don't understand what motherhood costs. You only see the surface. And now you're punishing me for not being perfect." But I wasn't. I never asked for perfection, asked for presence, for protection, for privacy. She ended the letter with the worst line of all, "I hope one day your son treats you with the same grace and understanding you've shown me." It was cruel. Subtle, but cruel. A mother cursing her own daughter with the same fractured bond she once refused to acknowledge. A final twist of the knife, hidden in cursive and coded in sentiment. James watched me read it. He didn't ask what it said. He didn't need to. He just sat beside me and waited until I could breathe again. "She wants to be the last word," I whispered. He nodded. "She always has." But I wouldn't let her, because 2 hours later, something happened that made everything clear. A nurse came in to go over Elias's discharge plan. We were discussing feeding schedules and car seat safety when she paused, then asked, "Has the social worker spoken to you today?" I froze. "No." "Why?" There was a concern raised. A call. Anonymous. Claiming neglect. My stomach dropped. James stood. "What kind of neglect?" The nurse hesitated. It was vague. Emotional neglect, postpartum instability. Standard flags. "But we've documented your care. We know the truth. The file's already been cleared." But that wasn't the point. The point was someone had tried, someone had made a call, anonymous. Vague. Timed perfectly to coincide with our discharge, and there was only one person who would do that. One person who would rather risk her grandson staying in the hospital longer than allow him to come home to a life without her. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, just stood up and said, "We need to finish the paperwork." Because I understood something now. My mother didn't want access to Elias, she wanted to control the story. The ending. The legacy. If she couldn't be in our lives, she'd rewrite the script, turn herself into the victim, turn me into the villain, and hope the audience believed her version long after the curtain fell. But I was done acting. That night, James and I sat in the nursery. The crib was ready. The tiny clothes folded. Elias's name stitched on a blanket, soft and new. I held him in my arms for the first time without wires, without machines, without fear, and I whispered into his ear, "You don't owe anyone a role in your life just because they had a role in your beginning." I meant every word, even if that included my mother, especially because it did. Elias came home on a Wednesday. The drive from the hospital was quiet. No music. Just the soft sound of his breath from the back seat, and the occasional hum of the oxygen monitor clipped to his car seat. James kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on my leg, a silent rhythm of reassurance. We'd made it. We were here. Our house felt different. Still. Fragile. Like a room you don't want to breathe too hard in, afraid you'll wake a memory that hasn't fully settled. The nursery was ready. The crib, untouched. The mobile spinning slowly in the air conditioning draft, casting shadows across the wall, and in that quiet moment, I realized something I hadn't been ready to admit before. I was grieving, not just the trauma of nearly losing my son. Not just the nights in the NICU or the machines or the fear. I was grieving my mother, or maybe, the idea of her, the version I'd spent my entire life hoping would one day exist, the version that would show up without making it about herself. That would hold space without performing. That would really see me, as a daughter, not as a rival, not as a threat to her narrative, but as someone worthy of protection. That version never existed, and when Elias came home, so did that. Truth, I didn't answer her messages anymore. She sent one a day, a rotation of guilt, denial, and veiled threats. I saw a photo. He looks healthy. You're welcome. I forgive you, Emily. Even if you can't forgive yourself. You'll regret this one day. I won't be around forever. She was right about one thing, she wouldn't be around because 1 week after we came home, I filed for a formal restraining order. Not just a hospital ban. A court-issued, legally binding order. No contact. No visits. No social media mentions. No gifts. Nothing. The lawyer advised against it at first. It might escalate her, she warned, but she didn't understand. This wasn't escalation, this was closure. The day we went to court, Linda didn't show, she sent a statement through her attorney, a weak, performative declaration of how much she loved her family and how hurt she was to be cast out. There was no denial of the selfies. No explanation for the social media posts. Nothing about the anonymous CPS call, just the same familiar song, misunderstood, heartbroken, unfairly judged. The judge approved the order without hesitation, and just like that, she was out, legally, logically, but emotionally? That took longer, because even without her in our lives, I found myself flinching at small things. A certain perfume. The chime of a Facebook notification. The sound of a woman's voice lifting too sweetly in public, the kind that hides daggers behind compliments. It didn't fade overnight, but Elias helped. Every time I held him, every time I fed him, changed him, comforted him, I rewrote something in myself. Every quiet night in that nursery became a kind of reparenting. For him. For me. One evening, when he was 3 months old, I got a message from someone unexpected. It was a woman I didn't know. She said she'd found me through a parenting group. She wrote, I saw your post from months ago. About your mom. I just wanted you to know. It gave me permission to say no. To set boundaries. To stop pretending. Thank you. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it, because that was the thing I hadn't expected. This story, mine, Elias's, it didn't end in the courtroom. It didn't end in the NICU. It ended in every moment I chose honesty over silence, boundaries over guilt, truth over performance, and in doing that, I became the mother I never had, the one who doesn't post pain for attention. The one who doesn't turn her child's life into content, the one who stands, quietly but fiercely, between the world and the ones she loves, even when that world includes her own mother, especially then.